Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hello. Hi, Ted. Hi, John. Hi, Mario. Hi, Lisa. And Michael. We'll just give it another moment or so, another minute, see if people get logged in. It's a beautiful, sunny, a little bit cool day here in Prince Edward County, but loving the sun. Looking forward to warmer weather. Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Kaylee. Morning, Carrie. Sounds okay? Morning, Cindy. I don't know if anybody can hear my dog snoring. Hopefully not. Hi, Alana. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Ben. All is well. Yes. Eugenia, hi. Alrighty, I think we're going to get going. And good morning, Ted. I think we're going to get going. And, as people join, the first few slides are just welcoming everyone here. And we're excited to be back, part of this 6-week session of managing angry moments. My name is Brenda Riddell, and I'm from 8 Ring, Trenton. I just wanted to remind you all that we have health promotion offices, of course, across the country, and we have 4 core program areas, and the Managing Angry Moments is part of our social wellness pillar. Today's session is week 3 of part of a 6-week series, and I am co-facilitating that with my colleagues Cindy and Lisa. The purpose of the Managing Angry Moments course is to increase our skills and increase our confidence with regards to preventing and or managing situations that might make you angry. A couple of things before we get started. This presentation this is from Health Promotion Headquarters in Ottawa. The presentation you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense. So any reproduction or retransmission is strictly prohibited. Some of the topics that we're going to be talking about are sensitive of nature and so not appropriate for children, so we ask for parental discretion. Any stories or anything shared in this webinar today, or any of the other webinars for that matter, are stories that are the individuals to tell, so we ask that you don't discuss them outside of the webinar. The webinar is being recorded. So it is available for viewing later on at cathconnection.ca. If for some reason you missed one of the prior series, or you'd like to re-watch something, then just go on to Cath Connection and you'll be able to do so there. The second thing that I need to do is a quick poll. One sec. Tab. There we go. So if you wouldn't mind answering what your affiliation is with the CAP community. Just a reminder that anything that goes into these polls, or any statistics that come from the polls, any individual statistics, are not shared with anybody. This is simply just for tracking who's attending our programs. So we have about 50-50, quite frankly, with military members and family members and civilian employees. So thank you for doing that. We will move on. Now, for those of you who have been with us for a while and attending the last 2 weeks, you'll know that I was with you a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that I just wanted to do as we get started is touch base with where you are in relation now in comparison to what you've been doing over the last couple of weeks. So I don't know if anybody's noticed anything about your anger in the last couple of weeks. Has your awareness changed? So are you more aware of signs and symptoms, physical, mental, or other? Has that increased? You can go on the chat and just, yes. Thank you, Ted. More aware of letting things go. Awareness of it, is able to stop and think before I blow up. That's fabulous. And more alert. Reflecting on conversations. Yeah. So, you know what? This isn't about switching from black to white. So if you always reacted in a certain way and you've had 2 webinar sessions, this isn't about, becoming a whole new person. This is just about increasing our awareness and seeing if we can find different ways to respond to things that are triggering us or causing us, reflecting on conversations. Thank you. Has anybody taken any time for self-care activities? And if so, what did you do? I mean, these times are unique in our history. What kinds of things have you been doing for self-care? A large landscaping project. That's awesome. Mario, and knowing some science, that's good. Yoga, running, meditations. Good, more running. Yay, Dan. Building puzzles. Ooh, that would make me angry. Breathing before going to bed, and fitness is not a problem. Good. Learning to reflect your anger in a non-angry way, and doing PT. So hopefully these self-care activities are helping you manage your emotions and your anger or your frustrations. For today, what we are going to talk about are triggers and trigger thoughts that lead to angry reactions. And we're going to talk about personal beliefs about anger and some of the costs and benefits of anger. And we're going to look at ways to avoid or escape anger-generating situations and discuss some ways to relax or calm ourselves down. So all of us have heard of trigger warnings or getting triggered by something or someone before. So what does getting triggered mean to you? Oh, look at that. Renovations, handyman. What does getting triggered actually mean to you? Getting triggered instantly sets me off. Losing control. My button becomes activated. Yep. Blowing up. Seeing something not right. Yes. Yes. All of these things are part of being triggered. What kinds of things, something that upsets me, challenges in a bad way, yep. What kinds of things, if you were to make a broad list of triggers, as opposed to, Jane Doe or Jim Smith, you would say a person or people, what kinds of things might you put on a list if you were to create a list of triggers? Arguments, yes. Stupidity, sure. Disrespect, noisy neighbors, yep. Toddlers and preschoolers, absolutely not getting their way. Unreasonable expectations and short timelines, yes. Ignorant people, dog barking at night, rudeness, yes. All of those things are potential triggers. And when we look at this, your list creates some of what we've got here. So reflect some of what I've got on this slide. So people, words, opinions, situations, environment, all of these things, people who misuse, yes, their authority, yes. So these things, it really could be anything depending on what's important to you that provoke and elicit a very intense response from us. Someone hitting my car yesterday and drove away. Ooh, but I was cool as they had left. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry that happened. Oh my goodness. Yeah, all of these things. So this would be, when we think about triggers, we think about our beliefs, we think about our values, we think about life experiences. All of these things are a part of what a trigger is. What emotions might we experience when we're being triggered? Anger, frustration. Oh, that's so good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Being upset, being frustrated, being angry. Yes, frustration. It could be a wide variety of emotions. And why might we want to know what triggers us? Feeling overwhelmed. Feeling of guilt. Yes. Agitated. Control. Yes, we want to control it. All of the above. Why might we want to know what triggers us? To control. Does it allow for us to prepare for things that might trigger us and be able to manage our emotions? Yes, you can see the signs. Yes. So when we're thinking about once a triggering situation is experienced, like somebody hitting your car, there's two kinds of thoughts that can follow that situation. One type of thought are trigger thoughts, and trigger thoughts tend to intensify your emotions. They intensify those physical responses or sensations, that we're having, and they create behaviors and actions. Those trigger thoughts are often judgmental in nature, and they create and exacerbate those situations. Keeping that in mind, one of the things I would like you to do, thinking about the triggering thoughts to a stressful or triggering situation, one of the questions that I have for you is, do you think you can make yourself feel angry without thoughts driving your anger? Why did the person leave? Yes, yes. Good question, Kathy. So Jim, no. Mario, no. So the question is, can you make yourself feel angry without thoughts driving the anger? So if you were to make your mind go completely blank, and maybe you were able to move, you could tighten your muscles, you could scowl, you could stomp your feet, you could do anything you want that makes it look like you're angry physically, but your mind must stay completely blank. No. So when we think about thoughts and our thoughts and how important our thoughts are to our ability to be angry and what's creating anger for us, thoughts are key. So what I'd like to do is share a handout with you. So this is about anger, share now. So this one, what I would do is download it first. So this handout is about journaling. The goal of this handout is to journal what's going on with you so that you're able to predict situations that provoke you, and ultimately by journaling that and learning about yourself and the things that trigger you, then you're able to keep your temper under control. And one of the things that I want you to do is start looking for reoccurring thoughts. So what we find, and I think I may have mentioned this before, but for me, it's like that little hamster on the wheel that's running and running and running and not going anywhere. Sometimes our thoughts will repeat. And so reoccurring thoughts happen, and when that happens, it can exaggerate and intensify our angry response. So the journaling in this handout, there's lots of questions. I'm encouraging you to do the questions that work for you. But think about how thoughts, the idea is to think about how thoughts trigger. So when we're talking about thoughts and we're talking about trigger thoughts, again, we're connecting the thoughts and the feelings that create that feeling of anger. So underneath your feelings, you might see thoughts such as this. He ignored me. He didn't even consider my feelings. She did that on purpose. She disrespected me. He's trying to make me look bad. Can you relate to these kinds of thoughts, not specifically these ones? And what does that do for us, and how it triggers and how it exaggerates some of the thoughts? So if you think about some of the situations that are frustrating for you or anger generating for you, what kinds of thoughts are you having? Do they kind of look like these ones? Something that comes to mind for me is when we are interacting with people and we approach someone in anger, oftentimes the only thing that people hear is my anger. So if I approach somebody in anger, the only thing that they hear is my anger. They don't actually always hear exactly what it is that I'm saying. So how do we change those trigger thoughts? The second type of thought that can happen once a stressful or triggering situation is experienced are coping thoughts. So for us, coping thoughts are really the key to changing how we see a situation. They're going to decrease and de-escalate those emotional responses. They're going to de-escalate and diminish some of our physiological responses or sensations. And hopefully they will decrease those reactive responses. And by focusing on coping thoughts, we create a space that allows things to be different. So it allows us to take a step back. Can anyone think of an example of a coping thought that you've either used or that might work for you? Coping thoughts, are they like logical thinking versus emotional thinking? They could be thinking objectively. Yeah, it could be. Or it could be something like, it's not worth it. You know, who will know or care in a month? At least this will last for only, yes. The tone of voice, the words that come out. How do you change that tone of voice? How do you change those words when we're talking about a coping thought? Could even be something like, I'm really angry right now, I can't think straight, and I need to step away. Absolutely. That could be a coping thought for you. That's interesting. So that seems like not caring. Now, care. So I'd like to explore that for a minute. Cope by not jumping to conclusions. So not caring and not reacting to something that is really in a really explosive way. Does that change how you feel? So somebody who's not responding emotionally, does that mean they don't care? Yeah, it could be simply temporary and come back. So if you've been triggered in such a way that you cannot maintain your emotions in a way that's a way that you want to, or a way that you think is beneficial to the people around you or to you, then taking a moment to take a deep breath and not get angry and not explode. This isn't about not caring. So when we think about this too, if you think about the times when it's most important, might be with the people and the relationships with whom you look at long-term relationships or relationships that are important to you. You absolutely care. Does that help? Let me show you some examples here. So coping thought, maybe you're talking to your teenage son and you've asked him to do something and he's not doing it. A coping thought might be, he may not have heard me or may have become distracted. That would be a coping thought. So he's not doing this to purposefully ignore me. He's a kid. Does that help? Good. She has so much going in her life right now, she probably didn't intend to offend or insult or demean. If I came and if I went to my husband when he was in the middle of the last game of a series for World Cup, then so which might make you matter? I'm sorry, Tim. What might make you matter? If you tried the coping thoughts, you mean? Yeah. So has anybody ever asked you a question and you didn't hear them, so you didn't respond? Making an excuse to avoid getting upset? I suppose that's one way to look at it, but it's about finding ways to soothe yourself so that, so for example, if, has anybody ever been cut off driving before by somebody? I would think pretty much everybody has. Absolutely. Now, do we think that everybody that cut us off does it on purpose? Or do you think sometimes they just didn't see you? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. When you've been driving for a while, do you think you have potentially ever cut somebody off driving by accident? There's a good chance. Yeah, there's a good chance you have. It's just an accident. So, we're very fortunate that we live in Canada, and not somewhere that if you, hi Melissa, if we cut somebody off, they might blow you a kiss, or they might, shake their hand at you. It depends on their stress levels. But ultimately, if we think it was just an accident, and what if it was your grandmother and she just cut you off and you're like, Nanny, Grandma, you cut me off. Oh, did I? I didn't know. I didn't mean to. Yeah, if we can go those routes, this is what we're saying about coping thoughts. We're not trying to make ourselves matter. We're just trying to find ways to manage what's going on. So when you think about coping thoughts, what we want to keep in mind is that words have power. So in our exchanges with ourselves, inside our head, how we speak to ourselves, and in our exchanges with others, the words that we use and how you think have power. So they have influence over how you feel. For example, if you think that somebody has it out for you, you will probably see all their actions in a negative light. And the thing that we have to remember is our neural pathways. So the nerves and the pathways in your brain are strengthened by how you respond. So every time you repeat something, it makes that neural pathway in your brain stronger. It means that it's the go-to path automatically without thinking. So for example, if in my mind, I think, you make me so angry, or I think that's a trigger for me, and I choose to be angry. I'm not, you make me angry. Your behavior may irritate me because I find it offensive in some way, but I choose to be angry as opposed to you making me angry. So if you take a moment and think of the time when your thoughts affected your anger. In that time, in what ways could changing how you think help you control how you feel? If you changed your thought process about a specific situation, does it change how you feel? It can bring a calmness to the situation. So it does it mean that you can't still be offended by bad behavior? It just means that you're taking control over how you feel. Stop past mistakes by adding fuel to the present situation. Absolutely. Actually looking at the situation from the other side, sometimes that can be very helpful. It's about recognizing and choosing the thoughts. So when we use the coping thoughts, it helps to create a situation that allows us to move in the direction of problem solving. So taking a deep, actually looking at, taking a deep breath, I think back about the situation at work, for example, it's so different than at home as well. Absolutely. Yes, technology makes, hear about technology. Getting somebody to mediate to solve the problem. Absolutely, there's all kinds of ways that we can go. I'm trying to figure out why I'm angry. Yes. Am I hurt, irritated? Yes. And is it worth it? Absolutely. Listen, this happens to all of us. Stop yourself from saying this always happens. True. You know, those thought processes, when we're talking about that neurological pathway, this always is one of those judgmental statements that we say to ourselves. Yeah. Take a second thought. Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about our thoughts, that for me, that travels over into the beliefs. So when we're talking closely tied to our thoughts or our beliefs, how would you define the word belief? What comes to mind? Belief. Core. At the core of your being. Truth. Values. Could we say acceptance? Trust. The way you're raised. Yep, your morals. The way some stuff I learned. Yep. Values that define how I think and hold dear. Absolutely. All of these things. Ideas that we accept as true. Yeah. In someone or something. Yeah. So when we're talking about our beliefs, self-esteem and the way I put things into myself or not. Yes, all of these things, this is belief. This has to do with our belief system. So when we think about beliefs and we think about thoughts and we think about triggering thoughts, I have a couple of true and false questions for you with regards to common beliefs about anger. The first one is anger shouldn't be repressed. It's healthy to vent anger. The release of the anger by yelling or punching will result in a decrease in angry feelings. What do you think about that one? Even transitioning from military to civilian life was very hard. Yes, it's very hard work. That transition is incredibly difficult. So it is healthy to vent your anger, but the release of anger by yelling or punching can be problematic if we let it out in outbursts and tirades, because it only fuels the fire and it can reinforce your anger and it can ignite it. So yes, we need to vent it, but we have to be careful about how we release the anger. So how about this one? Other people respect me when I'm angry and aggressive. Angry should be expressed. Other people will respect me when I'm angry and aggressive. Yes, they fear. Absolutely. This has to do with fear. So this is important to remember when we're interacting with people and becoming self-aware. So one of the things, for example, I'll use me because I will know me best. But one of the things I learned as I got older is that I can be very intense. And so even if I'm not angry, people might think that I'm angry just because I'm a very intense person. So we have to know ourselves, and know how people perceive us. And we want to make sure that power doesn't come from bullying others. And when we get aggressive, it is a form of bullying. There is a way of doing it for sure. Was raised to treat others the way I would like to be treated. Absolutely. So what about there is no justification for anger? Anger is hate. Yes. Perspective happens as we age. Absolutely. Yeah. Listen, there are always justifications for being angry. That's how change comes. So again, if we think of, some of the big change in our lives, look at Malcolm X, look at um, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Anger, there is justification for anger, but anger and hate are not the same thing. So let's do one more. I get angry because situations and people make me angry. Yes, yes. And false, absolutely. Nobody else, you are emotionally reacting to them. Yes, you are reacting to people, but the choice is yours, is it not? You choose to be angry. No one else can make you angry. That's right, Krista. So thank you for participating in that. Keeping all of those thoughts in mind, we're going to go, when we think about beliefs and thoughts, and how they connect in a situation in reaction to a stressful event, how might your current beliefs and thoughts be impacting your anger and your anger response? If you think back to our triggering thoughts discussion, what would change for you if you changed the narrative about a particular situation? Oh, Kathy, are you okay? Okay. Past experiences. I would be in a better situation than I'm in now. Could you change? What would happen if you changed the narrative now? Are we still able to change our narratives? I think, okay, thank you. I apologize. I'm certainly not trying to trigger anything. You can only change yourself. You can't go back. That's right. So do you have control over it? So a lot of times when we think about anger, sometimes it's an emotion of intolerance. Sometimes it's an emotion that allows us to protect ourselves. It's not a bad thing, but we want to get control over it if we can. And sometimes that means we ask for help. So last week, Cindy talked to you about the anger management model and perceptions and beliefs and emotions and sensations, and how all of those things can happen simultaneously, which end up in a behavior. And what I'd like you to do is just think for you, reflect upon what are the costs of an angry response from me, and what are the benefits of an angry response from me in this specific situation. So can you sometimes get what you want by being aggressive? Thank you, Kathy. Yes. So being aggressive, you can sometimes get what you want. Does it come at a cost, potentially? And if it does, what's the cost? Yeah. So if we look at what the costs are, potentially friendships, are there potentially internal feelings that we might have of guilt can get you into a lot of trouble depending on what's going on. Absolutely. Or shame or embarrassment. It could potentially, momentarily give you some power. Yeah. What are the costs? Yes. And when we think of a calm response, the same thing. We want to try and think, what are the costs for me of a calm response? Maybe you don't get what you want. Maybe you feel weak. Maybe the problem might not be solved right now, but what are the benefits? And this is the opposite of what some of the angry responses are. You might feel more respect for yourself. It might benefit your relationships, and you still might be able to maintain boundaries. This is not about letting people walk all over you. This is about maintaining some boundaries. I want to remind you that chronic anger can negatively impact your health and potentially hurt our relationships. So we want to think about what we're doing and what will work for us. What can we do to help us manage our anger? Well, there's a few things that we're going to focus on today, some strategies we might use when anger is involved in a situation. So avoid and escape strategies are what we're going to talk about today. And they can be used to reduce the tension that's happening when there's frustration and anger happening in the moment. And they can be used to hopefully prevent further damage to some of our relationships. But be aware that they're not permanent solutions because you're not solving the problems. Loss of power. Yes. Yes. So let's look at avoiding. Does anybody use avoidance when we're dealing with people that we're really angry with or who are angry with us? Yeah. When I think about this, you can even be in a situation or in conversations with people, and I see, thank you, yes, oh yeah, too often, yes, unfortunately, it happens. But you know what? It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's about remembering that the problem doesn't go away when we use avoidant. And you can learn to be absent in your mind or in your emotions and still be there physically. So avoidance doesn't always look the same. So when we're talking about avoidance, we've got three different versions here. One would be planned. So let me give you an example of that. Is if you're driving to work and you decide because traffic really irritates you or there's construction, you plan to take a different route. That would be a type of avoidance to try and maintain your anger. Do you think that, yes, I do think that most humans avoid to some degree. Yes. Another version of avoidance would be time delays. So for example, this is giving yourself time before responding to something. So your boss comes in and asks you to work on the weekend, or your mother-in-law says something that you find very hurtful. You can ask them, can I get back to you on that? That buys you some time. The third version that we've got here is by using another method of response. So I knew a couple who were divorced, but they still had to interact because they had children together. So they had to communicate, but speaking to one another triggered both of them. So what they decided to do was email or text, and that gave them both time before responding. That allowed them to calm down if something was said that was triggering for them. So these are ways to use avoidance. The next type is what we call escape strategies. And these are useful if you want to interrupt your angry response. So an example of this might be somebody drops by your office and maybe they just don't know when to leave. So they come in and they just sit down and they make themselves at home. So what can we do? So this is, so that we don't get angry and yell at them, you plan your escape. So you put a plan in place and you say, what does that look like? So this is, again, useful and effective for situations that simply can't be avoided. So types of escape, again, planned escape, distraction, and timeouts. So again, the planned escape, so in this instance where somebody comes by your office and you just can't get rid of them, one of the things that you might do when they come to your door is to say very clearly, hi, I have 10 minutes. And then if you're seated, for example, at the 10-minute mark, you stand up and walk to the door to escort them out. That would be a version of planned escape. Distractions would be useful when you are likely to lie and tell them that I have a meeting soon. Anything works. Distractions are helpful when you are focusing on something negative. So I liken this to, when you have your small children, anybody who's had small children and they keep asking for something and you show them something shiny and get them redirected somewhere else. Well, you can do that for yourself and find something that makes you happy and you like, and it makes you feel better. And the third one is timeout. So this is taking a step back and taking an opportunity to take a break so that you can walk away, collect your thoughts before you act impulsively or irresponsibly or inappropriately. And taking that time out is recognizing that you're starting to get angry and that the anger is starting to go somewhere that you don't want it to. So I'd like to expand on the timeout piece a little bit. So if you think back to last week in Anger Mountain, when you're at the peak, you have very little regard to other people's feelings or the consequences of your actions. Yeah. Tell them to come back later. Yep. Yes, I guess that's why there's a break in the workday. Absolutely. So when we think about the peak, we don't want to get to that peak because I don't know about you, but I've been in the middle of an angry exchange and had the realization that maybe I was wrong. But when you're at the peak of anger, at no point was I going to admit that I was wrong at that point. I had to wait till I calmed down before I could come back. So when we look at time outs, this is about recognizing that you're going into that peak and finding a way to get away so that you can calm yourself down and then come back if you can. So here you want to be able to recognize what your early cues are. Are you guys starting to become more familiar with your signs that you're getting angry? Mm-hmm. Good. So when we think about that, what do you do when you're starting to get angry? Do you take a time out? Go for a walk? Walk away? Mm-hmm. Do you tell the other person? If there's somebody else involved, do you tell the other person, I'm starting to get mad and I need to take a break? Mhm. So one of the things that's good. Yes, I'm also becoming more aware that it's okay if I'm angry. Yep, learning to deal with the emotion instead of just shoving it away. True, yes. Depends on who. Yes, that's true too. Yep. Yesterday I managed to not answer an email immediately, which brought up my anger, but I was unable to concentrate on what I was doing at the moment. Yeah, so that's that recognition that that's happening and taking a moment to calm down. And the inability to concentrate is totally in line with anger. That's very, very common, that inability to focus. And that's why taking a break can be very, very helpful. Yeah, removing yourself from the situation. Even if you can't physically remove yourself from the situation, if you can do so inside your mind, it can be helpful. So when we think about this, and we think about taking a time out, sometimes the people in our lives will be, they want to know stuff and they want to deal with it right away. And sometimes, or maybe that's us, and the other person in the relationship or the person with whom you're having a disagreement wants to walk away. If you're going to walk away, it's important, if the relationship is important to you, to let the other person know that you're willing to come back and to have a conversation about this particular contentious issue. Yes, because silence can be really quite awful. Yeah, especially because the person might feel that you don't care. So if you're walking away without letting them know that you're going to come back, um, if it's a relationship that's important to you, then the silence piece can be very problematic. Yes, silence can be hard on some people. For other people, it allows them to calm down, but for some people, the silence is very difficult. So one of the things that we want to talk about there is, what do we do if the silence is hard for us? How do we take care of ourselves? So potentially something like a meditation. And there's all different kinds of meditations that you can do, spiritual, mindfulness, being in the moment, moving ones like yoga, focusing on something very specific, using visualization or imagery to help calm yourself down. But the bottom line is all of these things usually involve deep, full breath into the belly. Mm-hmm. When you're looking to make some changes, there is actually a thing called stages of change. So when we're here, like to write it down, fantastic. Yes, whatever works. So you have to think about change and your desire to make change. It doesn't happen in a straight line. So you might take 2 steps forward and you might go 1 step back. You might take 1 step forward and you might go 1 step or 2 steps back. That's what happens with change. It's not a constant movement forward. And I have for you a handout here that is on change. And there are examples in it that are specific to anger. So when you're looking to try and make the changes in your life to how you interact with people, this is just reminding you that change takes time, and that we have been the way we are for quite some time. So be kind to yourself. It's okay if things aren't perfect. It's okay if we can't control everything that's going on in our lives. We just need to look at where we can find control, and one of those things is in our thoughts. And are we choosing trigger thoughts or coping thoughts? How do they align with our beliefs, and how are we managing that? So as we get close to the end, I want to remind you of the resources that are available to you. The Canadian Forces membership assistance program, Canada Suicide Hotline, information on COVID-19, family information line, sexual misconduct response center, kids help phone, ARC line in support of COVID. So there are lots of resources. I want to encourage you to think about what anger management looks like for you. This is a process. And when you're doing that, I've got a handout for you called What If. So this is the positive and negative outcomes. You're looking at, oops, sorry about that, called What If. This one is, are you looking at the glass half full or are you looking at the glass half empty? So you look at specific situations that are going on in your life, and you've got two columns. One is positive and one is negative. So you look at a specific situation and you say, what if all these positive things happen, and what are all the potential negative things that can happen? So this is just about acknowledging and finding out where we are and figuring out the what ifs. I do also have to ask you a quick poll as we get in towards the end. If you wouldn't mind answering, if you feel like you can use what you've learned today. So thank you for participating in that. Looks like most of you feel that you can use what we've talked about. So that's awesome. And I have one more poll. These are polls that we are asked to ask you from headquarters. So if you wouldn't mind, how satisfied are you with the Demio platform? So this platform that we're using right now. So as we get to the end of this, what we talked about today were trigger thoughts, trigger thoughts, coping thoughts, our beliefs, really focusing on things like a timeout or escape strategies to avoid anger. We looked quickly at the meditation styles, and I encourage you to choose one that works for you if that's feasible. And I want you to recognize that change takes time. So don't be afraid to ask somebody for help, but be kind to yourself. And I want to remind you that next week, we're talking about reframing thinking errors. So we'll go on with some of these triggering thoughts and figure out what some of our thinking errors are, and figure out ways to manage those thoughts in order to assist us with anger. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Mario. I know the platform's a bit to learn the platform, but yeah, it does take a while. Thanks, Ted. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, it is a beautiful world. Yes, so if, Ilana, if you email us at hptrenton2@gmail.com, hptrenton2@gmail.com, then we will touch base with you. Lisa's put down some of the registration, the link there. And Cindy has written the hbtrenton2gmail.com there. So please use that if you'd like to touch base with us, and we can email a certificate of attendance to your chain of command. Mm-hmm. You are absolutely courageous to go there. This requires a great deal of commitment and introspection and willingness to look in the mirror. And it's tough. It's tough, but it's an absolutely rewarding experience. Thank you so much, Kathy. That's really nice. It's wonderful to have you. I really appreciate your participation in the chat. It makes all the difference in the world. So I hope that we will see you all again next week. We've got how many? We've got 3 more weeks. This is week 3, so we have 3 weeks left. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you. Have a nice day, Mario. Thank you.